right, we are back for another episode, and today we're going to talk about summer training and sort of how we look at it and approach it in our summer program at OGX for college athletes. So this is a time period, obviously, for college athletes. It's very unique. For some of these athletes, this is, for freshmen often, or those finishing their freshman year, this is probably the most sort of unbroken, true off season many of those athletes have had. I think also just in general for college athletes, when they're coming off of like the structure of a college season and training, it's a time period where everyone's just kind of navigating what exactly to do, what training should look like. I don't think it's very common that we have college athletes who are like, I sat around all summer and did nothing. But I think building that structure and knowing how to approach the summer program is hard. I think that we're still have been navigating that the past few years with softball players and programs and maybe how that they should attack that. What we've seen sort of historically is that college players they have their lifting program maybe from their school, or they have some general outline of like, these are the types of things we'd like you to work on, get better at, improve at this summer. And then they kind of go home, and that process becomes a little haphazard for them of how to attack those things or what way to attack those things. And so we really have built in our summer program, mirrored very much off of what we do, just generally, is a system that starts with our biomechanics assessment and builds from there of sort of a very structured off season. And we have found this so valuable for so many players because it's the most off season that college athletes get. And so it's really a time that they can make a lot of change, get healthy. We'll talk about some of these examples, but they have this like first opportunity to really dive in to a time period where they can really be trying to make progress and change. So we'll talk about hitting to or position players, but maybe from your standpoint for pitchers, walk through kind of why some pitchers should or have chosen to come do our summer program. What are some of the things we're tackling during that time period?
Yeah, I was going to say as you were talking, I was going to say, like, the idea of going home over summer and doing training, it's basically darts at a dartboard. This is a concept and a phrase that we use all the time. You need to be better, or that you need to come back more prepared, or you think I want to add a tool, and it's just all like gathering. It's kind of like pulling ideas out of nowhere, throwing a bunch of darts, hoping something sticks. The plan is just something probably like you came up with, who knows? And so I think that just the core concept of what we do at OGX, that alone is so powerful for our college athletes over the summer, because it's as you said, a very particular time that is really, it's their time. That's the best way to say it. This is their time to separate from their coaches, to really own up to, how did you feel about the year? What was it like? Did you feel your best? Did you feel as if you were linked? You felt, like you were in your own identity there? Did you feel like you were fighting your identity? Like, let the athletes speak for themselves. And then let's establish objectively what's real. So let's look at the biomechanics assessment, which obviously comes with a full ball flight assessment. We always say, it's a biomech assessment, which is true. It's going to tell us about how you're moving in your motion, how susceptible you maybe are to experiencing some pain, what your velocity is looking like, what your arm slot gets to. And then we link that to ball flight. We link that to what is going on with the ball. How hard are you throwing? Like what's your main break profile? How much variability do you have? And then we're able to really sit down and say, like, okay, this is how you ended the year. Was this enough? Where does this stack up based on other pitchers at that level? What do you feel like you need for next year? I need another tool. Okay, well, let's be really objective about what your arm slot is going to allow you to be able to add. So it's a very calculated, it's grab one dart, throw one dart, stick one dart through the center of the dartboard. Like, we don't have to guess. We don't have to just pull these random pieces, and then we can lay out for you how we would go about achieving those types of goals. So I think that's just so powerful, because we don't have time. The summer program is like, 10 weeks, right. By the time our athletes say, okay, I'm going to maybe take 2 weeks off, I want to take a breather, then I'm going to start ramping up. A lot of times our athletes will ramp up with just strength and conditioning before they add skill. And then by the time you know it, it's August, they're getting back in season, or maybe they want to throw live a little bit toward the end. Like, it's a very short period of time. We don't have time to throw darts. So I want to go over some of the examples of reasons why pitchers specifically have done a summer program at OGX. There's a couple categories, and we've said this many a times, but the summer program is for everyone. So even if this is not a category that necessarily feels like it's, oh, I'm in that category A or category B, it is for everyone. Target what you want to achieve. Do not spend your whole time over the summer just lounging. You could take some time off and then still really build up. Because as we know, once you hit the fall, like, things just go, like, things start rolling. The fall season is fast. So it really is the time to be able to feel like this is where I want to really get a hold of or take charge of whatever I want next year to look like. So some of those categories are A, I did not have the year I anticipated. I'm going back to my university. I love my university, but I just didn't have the year I expected. I didn't get the playing time I expected. I didn't do as well as I thought I would. I don't really understand why, probably. And so sometimes coaches might give those athletes some suggestions to go play live, to go do like a summer league. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, later in this episode of our thoughts on that. To simply do that without identifying, like, why weren't your tools good enough to get you the performance or get you the playing time that you wanted, expected, etc. We can't just play games and now all of a sudden your drop ball is going to get better. We already know this. Tools do not get better in games. They regress. Command regresses because the game induces fatigue. So we know this already. And so we need to establish, why weren't your tools good enough? You could pair that with a little bit of live, with a little bit of, league play. There are ways to do that. We can talk about that. But the reality is we have to get at the root of growing your foundation of tools. So that's one example. I didn't have the year I expected. Another example would be, I'm hurt, I'm in pain. Maybe even my performance was good, but I've got elbow pain, I have back pain. And so what's really important to note about athletes like this is that a huge mistake is for them to just take a break the majority or all of the summer, because yes, of course the pain's going away. You take away the variable that's causing your patterns are creating, your pitching patterns are creating pain. You remove that, pain is gone, you're feeling good. You can't just then return and ramp up and go. Is it important to put out the fire? Meaning, yes, remove the stimulus and get things to calm down. Of course it is. But then what? So repatterning, being able to understand that this is where the biomech assessment is huge for our athletes, is to understand what's going on with their patterns. Like, workload is too high for all pitchers. That's not simply why we have pain. There's other things behind that. It could be on the strength and conditioning side. It could be you're susceptible to certain, like weaknesses, lack of stability, et cetera, which we can talk about. And then oftentimes the majority of it is in pattern inefficiency. So we have to, yes, put out the fire, but then understand how to repattern so we're not on this like merry-go-round of pain. So that's another reason athletes might come. We have some pitchers that will come because they had a great year. And a lot of times these are pitchers where it was their first great year. Maybe they're a freshman, redshirt freshman. Maybe they kind of came out of nowhere, but now they're like, but now everyone knows who I am. And it's so difficult for pitchers to return a second year and have success again once everyone knows what they have, what to expect. And so they're like, I need to add something. And so again, we can't just say like, oh, you're a drop ball pitcher, so add a rise. Duh. Like, it's not that simple. Your arm slot doesn't give you that. So we can, through our initial assessment, give them really the options. If you want to be able to elevate a ball here, then we have to be able to throw it at X speed. It's not going to be able to be at Y speed. Like, we can really break those things down. And so we do have athletes that come, they're like, I had a great year. So just because you had a great year does not mean that you just chill and put your feet up all summer, or that you go back and do what you did the summer before, because now it is so much harder to repeat that. And then I think this is so interesting. This is a category that I think some of our most powerful summer program stories have really originated. And it's in this, I've like lost my identity. It's usually freshmen. I got recruited because I threw X, Y, Z. I had so much success in high school and travel ball. And then I got there and I was told like, these tools aren't enough. Usually it's a velocity concept. It's usually an athlete who throws kind of like a weird, I'm going to say weird in like air quotes here, because I don't mean that in a negative. They just have like a unique ball flight profile, but it looks like they shouldn't be having success, maybe because they throw a little more off speed. That's confusing to their coaches, maybe who don't quite understand it. And so that pitcher didn't really get a lot of time. And so this isn't, you didn't get a lot of time because your tools aren't good enough. It's like they asked me to start throwing X pitch or leaning into an identity, and I just couldn't match with that. These are pitchers that come to us and they feel lost. They feel disconnected from who they've always been as a pitcher. And that's a major problem, because I'm not saying that you can't reinvent, oh, you thought you were a drop ball pitcher, but you're actually an X pitcher. We've seen things like this before, but when you really disconnect a pitcher from the identity that is giving them success all the way up, you really have to give them some concrete reasons why and show them some measurables that they're getting there. And so I think some of our most powerful stories, athletes we've had in our office who have like cried, athletes on, the cried the initial assessment, cried at the end of the summer, like, thank you so much. This has changed my career. I know that sounds like dramatic just from a summer program, but it's not. We get these circumstances all the time. And that's usually what we're looking at. We help them understand this is why you're great. This is what makes you who you are. This is what that pitch probably needs to be for your coach to understand it. It should have this many swings and misses. This is where you need to locate it in order to get that. This is the variability off of it you need to have. This is the off speed element of it you need to have. Like, layer it so that basically they go back with their same identity, with their same tools, but a better understanding of it, better layers of variability with it, better success rates with it, et cetera. And then we sort of like reconnect them to who they are. So yeah, there's been a lot of categories, I would say, of why pitchers do this, but I think it all comes back to this concept of target exactly what your goals are, measure exactly what's going on and how far away or how close you are to those goals. And then let's literally plan out for the entire summer the track you should be on, and let's plan out how we will track whether or not we're on the right, how we're going to measure whether or not we're on track with those goals based on some objective type of goals and our ability to see those things in our data management system.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's interesting because we have had athletes from programs who we work with who have a high level of access to data and player development in the season, who come and train still with us. And it still makes sense because, for the reasons you're saying, whatever you were working on leading into that season is going to change and fluctuate, and how you're going to attack and what you should attack that summer changes. And so it gives you this sort of restart, this fresh assessment to kind of see, where are we right now? Okay, now where are we trying to go this summer? It's very targeted. Obviously, those players often, not always, because maybe we're able to deliver it in slightly different ways than their staff, but they'll have some knowledge of, it won't be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was going to work on that, or my pitches did those things, but it's still so valuable for those players. And then we have the players that come, whether they're hitters or pitchers, who have no access to anything at their campuses. And that could be because of the level they play at. They just don't have a level of those resources, or maybe their staff just hasn't invested in certain parts of it, or whatever that might be. And those are obviously so powerful, because sometimes for those athletes, this is the first time they've heard this information, or maybe they worked with us before they left for college and now they're coming back and kind of restarting from this. And I think those are powerful because, one, all the things you already said, which it gives them a really targeted basis for what their training should look like, sometimes with knowledge they don't even have yet or know about themselves to tackle that. But it also empowers them, even if they're not going to have those resources when they go back to campus, to really then go back into the fall season with an understanding of themselves that they maybe didn't have before. And so I think in all of those scenarios, it's just such a good opportunity for coming and really learning these things. On the hitting side, I think we see a lot of similar things. Obviously, injury is probably not as workload injuries are not as prevalent unless it's a two-way player. But I think a lot of times, one of the things that we see is, we've talked about this like freshman thing a lot. Sometimes we see freshmen have a good year hitting, or at least they start with a good year because they're lifting, not maybe for the first time. I think at this point, at this stage of our game, most people go into college having lifted a little bit at least, but they're lifting that focused and in that way, with softball being their main focus for the first time. And so they put on mass, they put on power, they have these, they fueled their engine. And so they might sort of come out with a bang because of that. We've added exit velocity. We've done things that are giving them more success, but they don't know the story of their swing and patterns. And so they either sometimes like fizzle in that year, or it's inconsistent, or if they don't come and attack things that summer, we'll have, and I think what a lot of people refer to as like the sophomore slump for all the reasons you talked about, which is no one knew me when I was a freshman. And now whatever level you play at a minimum, I'm going to have a spray chart on you. I'm going to have something. And at the highest level, we're going to have really detailed, hot, cold, and we're going to be able to really go after you and your weaknesses. And so if you don't then build on that and make sure you're filling in those gaps, you're going to go in and maybe be disappointed with what you bring to the table the next thing. And so I think for hitting, we see all those same things of identifying, what do we need to work on? I think sometimes if I don't have regular access, you think about these seasons, I had someone ask like, why do you think X pitcher isn't as dominant as she's been in the, past or whatever? And you look at the SEC now and the highest level of our game, and it's so brutal. It's so competitive. There's so many games, like everyone's tired. People have seen you, we have the highest level of knowledge on everyone now. So there's just so much going on. So as I'm in that grueling season as a hitter, one thing that we'll see is I don't realize things are unraveling. And I know that you see this with pitchers too, but pitchers maybe realize it faster because they start getting hit. And as a hitter, maybe I keep riding the success for a while. And then sometimes we'll come at that first assessment. And when we get the high speed and the motion capture and everything, it's surprising how much has changed. They haven't realized their whole first move has changed. They have this like whole different approach with their bat. They have all of these things, and that happens a lot. And so it gives us this opportunity to like, let's reset, let's clean the patterns up, let's really go to work with what we need to. And so it's similar from that standpoint. So I'm going to go rewind really quick and kick it back to you to talk a little bit more about leagues in the summer and playing games, and maybe some of the, I know it's easy to say you shouldn't play, like, you should focus on training. Like, why do you need to play a league? But I think we've seen examples where maybe it has been helpful. So maybe walk through your sort of opinions on that. You can talk just from the pitcher standpoint. I can talk a little bit from the hitter standpoint.
Yeah, sure. This kind of goes hand in hand, but I wanted to comment quickly on what you were saying about, I think this is really important now that we have data. We spend so much time for years we did at the high school level, and now we're doing it at the college level, tracking what happens with athletes during the course of season. They just regress. They get so unstable. They're exhausted. Their bodies are exhausted. Command is the number one thing to go for pitchers. So the first thing to go, the first sign of fatigue is command, then goes break profile, then goes velo. And sometimes we just think if they're still throwing hard, they're not tired, like they're doing okay. And that we've realized that's not the case. So I think what's really important is that it's not just, we don't just see it with the pitchers who are throwing 2 out of 3 games a series. Just the schedule, the travel, managing, they're not just softball players, managing what they might have going on in their home life, what they have going on in school. They're just fatigued and exhausted. And so the schools we work with throughout the college year, we're pulling every string we can to try to keep those athletes afloat throughout the year as much as possible, right? So maybe their like in-game IQ goes up, their ability to like, compete in such is goes up, but their actual tools are just slowly regressing. So that's the case for everyone. And it's not a one size fits all model. There's individuality to it. But I think the reality is because of that, almost no athlete needs games over the summer. They're exhausted. They need to rebuild the base. What does that look like exactly? To what extent? How bad, from a strength and stability standpoint, how bad are we looking over there? How much of your patterns regressed? What can we build up? There's individuality here, but games are just adding more fatigue. It's just more of the same, more of the same, more of the same. So I would say the only circumstance where I would say someone needs games are really in this, I did not get the playing time I expected. And the circle feels foreign to me. There is this real element where if you do not walk into the circle and feel at home, and you do not feel like this is the space, this little circle drawn around me is the space where I feel like me. It's where I feel most at ease. It's where I feel most confident. If I get in there and I start to feel like this is the version of myself that I don't recognize, I don't know, I now I'm questioning this because of whatever reasons there are, it's usually just like a disconnect from being out there enough, then Yeah, we have to tie that in. Does that make sense? So we also want to go back to the root of why you didn't get the time. We need to train. And then there are circumstances where we can say, okay, maybe on the weekends, maybe twice a week, there's either you can throw live to hitters, you can get into a league where you throw a little bit. And we've had athletes do that. And we just built their training throughout the week in between games so that games become just this extension of testing what they're doing in training and an opportunity to find themselves back in that circle again, right? To understand who they are, to remember who that person is, to take deep breaths and know, like, I'm at ease. And so it becomes a part of training. It's not games, league, or training. And anytime we've chosen one over the other, meaning we chose games, over training, it's a huge mistake. I don't know many circumstances where I would say like all or nothing in games is where that athlete needs to be. I think we've just done that because we don't know what else to do. Like the pitching community, we just are like, go throw, go get better. We don't know what that means. And so pitchers aren't out there because they have these amazing tools and they just don't know how to compete. You would have seen that before you recruited them. If that's really what it looks like, then they have some serious performance anxiety, and then they need also a plan and the sports psychologist, et cetera. You don't just throw them into a league. So yes, I do think there's an opportunity. Sometimes athletes are just like, I just want to play for fun. I just need to like feel reconnected to the game and to my position again. Great. As long as it's a piece, it's not 4 times a week, 5 times a week. We practice every single day, like something totally extreme. As long as it can intertwine with a training plan of probably at the bare minimum 2 times a week, if not 3, then that's fine. I think that's fine to intertwine it. I think it's best to not do it, but there are circumstances where I can see why athletes need it and where we've seen them do it and it's been very successful for them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's very similar for hitters, which is sometimes if they really haven't gotten the opportunities up into that point, they want to go into fall having taken some live at-bats, having tried to get as close to bridging that gap. Now, they should and will get plenty of opportunities to do that in the fall, but if they don't want the first time that happens kind of be in front of the coaching staff or on campus, then some opportunity. And I think with hitting, it's like you probably just need live at-bats. I'm not sure you really need to go into a league and hit. And also a lot of times, is the pitching you're facing and that really bridging the gap? There's a lot of questions about that, but I think similar, that's when it has been most beneficial for hitters. I think as you were talking, I was thinking, the transfer portal now has become a player in these things. And I think a lot of times people think maybe they need the leagues as an opportunity to get sort of recruited out of the summer. And I think I'll actually talk specifically about pitchers here. I think what we're finding, and we have a long way to go in exactly what this needs to look like. And I know now the clearinghouse is going to be doing some of these things, and there's the rules are constantly shifting and evolving as NIL changes and molds and all of those things. But I do think we have had a bit of an issue right now as everything is falling to figure out how to value pitchers when we are paying them, and also to figure out how we will know if pitchers will be successful at the level or in our league that we're going at. So I think I would say to both coaches and players that in the situation where you find yourself looking for a player or wanting to kind of, you're going to go into that transfer portal and you're going to do this, it's all the more reason in my mind, especially if you came from a program that has, I just think in any scenario, but if you came from a program that has no access to data, didn't play on many fields of data, like you had success at the level you were at, but you in some ways like only sort of know why and only sort of know how that will translate, then I think this is such a powerful way to get a real sense of how is the stuff I have going to translate at this next level and then, or the next school I go to and, whatever that looks like. And what do I need to then build on that to go? And I think coaches should really be looking for that information more than sort of wanting to see them compete in these leagues, which also are not going to be apples to apples with what you are going to ask them to do. And to me, you're just then still going into it blindly. Unless you're getting data out of that, you really have no idea why that athlete is having success. And her like competitiveness, yes, as you said, there's certainly a piece of having to like, be a boss in the circle, but you're not going to have success. It doesn't matter how competitive you are if you don't have the tools you need at the level you are. And so I think that has come up more and more. Certainly not like encouraging people to jump in the transfer portal all the time if they're happy at their home, but that's the reality of where the game is. That is a big piece of what happens during this time period. And I think for people to just really get a sense of who they are and to then have that information to also talk to coaching staffs as they're going through that process is really important. It's something that we've seen a lot. So that's the other instance where I think
I was going to say that's a bucket I missed, I would say. And I would say that's a bucket I missed is like, I know I want to transfer. Whether I got time or not, I just know this isn't a great fit for me. And so basically like, can you help me? Because I want you to speak on my behalf. I'm going to go into the transfer portal and I want you to speak on my behalf as far as like what my data is like, what you think I can get to, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a bucket I didn't mention I should have of pitchers that, players, not just pitchers, but that come to us and are like, can you tell someone what's special about me, why they should want me? And especially if they didn't get time because they can't look at their stat lines from the year before. Right. And so they're not just going to be like, she had this many strikeouts. She had this. Oh yeah, she had such a great year. And so instead they're relying on what are her tools?
Right. Yeah.
Like how much does that scale? So I think that's a huge one. There's something else that you said. Okay. If you're an athlete who is at a university with lower resources and they don't have data, they don't have access to technology, I would never say like, you can't go there. Because there's so many variables that go into your decision to pick a certain school, right? And so that decision is only on an athlete and their family. But if you want to really maximize who you are as an athlete, you have to understand the barrier that is lack of tech, lack of resources. And so if it is like, I want to be the best version of myself and my school cannot give me those resources, there has to be an element that you have to take that on, some of that on yourself then. And so it's difficult to do that. We do have athletes that do it in the summer, that they still stay connected to training. Maybe they still do OGX training throughout the year. They come every time they have a break, whatever that looks like. But the summer is it. Like if you do not have access to data, you do not know what you're throwing, you do not know what makes you special as a hitter, where the holes in your swing are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you have nothing objective telling you those things. It's not just some coach's subjective idea of what that looks like. You have to get in these doors. You cannot just go to like your local pitching coach, your local hitting coach, hit off front toss, do whatever this looks like. This is absolutely your time. I would say that this is the time to be able to like see the information, understand who you are. What does that mean? Connect to data. That's a huge thing. I mean, that is a huge, huge thing. So I think the reality is in a game in which we live in now, not having access to technology and data feedback from tech is it's a limiting factor on how good you can get. And that's just straight up. It doesn't mean you can't be good. It's a limiting factor. So like, this is your time, get in the door. Another thing that I was thinking about is I think athletes who are really burnt out, they're the ones that are least likely to do a summer program. And I would say they're the ones that are most likely should come find us, because I think one of our superpowers is in really humanizing our biomechanics assessment, really helping them feel seen, coming at them not from like an X's and O's standpoint simply. Yes, an X's and O's, but also a like, let us hear you. What are your pain points? Maybe I want to get better, but I also am so burnt out. I need time off. Okay, here's the most amount of time we think you can take. We think you should keep lifting. We think you should add in plyos in 2 weeks. We think you should ease into X. Like, let us hear you and then also see where you are and help you create a plan that matches that, right? We're not just dictating something to you and like, you've got to do this. If you miss a single day, like, we're not just getting athletes that are like, the day school ends or the day their season ends are like, let's go. We're not just getting athletes that are like that. We're getting athletes who are drained. They are exhausted. And we understand that. And so I do think, don't allow it to be so extreme. I need a break. I need to take off until July. I think waiting until like mid-June is probably the absolute max. If you start taking off until you get into July, you are going to have to ramp up if you're a pitcher inappropriately, meaning too much, too fast just to get ready. Forget gains. There are no gains, right? So if you take off, there has to be a ramp up. And so for you to appropriately dose volume and intensity back into your body and to assure your body can stay healthy. So if you wait until July, it's all about ramp up, and none of that is going to be about performance gains. And if that's your choice, that's your choice. But most of the time, athletes don't want that. They don't want to just show up the same old version of themselves. So we can just help kind of explain the X's and O's of that and lay out a full trajectory. We want to get to this. It should take this much time. This is when we need to start. Here's how we can dose volume intensity for that, and weigh in on what you need. Because what we always say, like, player development doesn't work if the athlete is not in. And so, like, let us help you get in. Let us help meet you halfway. And I do think there's a huge superpower for our OGX staff members in that, of like, we get who our audience is here. We get who our athletes are. These are young women who work so damn hard. They work so damn hard, and their hearts are on their sleeves. And these are great, not kids, young women. And they just have kind of been through the ringer most likely. And so we see them for that. And we can really be great, I guess, like partners in this process for them to reach their goals, and also have what they need to, like, take a little time away from the game, because a lot of them also they want to get better, and they also need the space and they need the time away. And I do think our program is designed to be able to give them both.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the way we write it is 4 days a week in the summer, and this isn't made, I think one of the things that just social media in general and sometimes the culture we create is like, you got to grind it out, practice is not enough, like just like all the cliche things that people hear. And we've talked about topics like this here before, where at the high school level and even in the junior high level, that becomes crazy what we're asking the kids to grind it out and do it as children, a lot of times. But that same, these are the kids that came out of that system and structure, and then maybe are still in a college structure that is similarly minded or has some of that, some of which is appropriate, like compete with the person next to you, work hard, push yourself, all of those things are appropriate, but some of which leads to this like haphazard, just go work hard, do something every day, hit up the tee every day. That's how you're going to get better. You got to go, take a million swings and do all these things. And so I think a lot of times it's shocking to people how much progress they can make in that sort of 10 weeks of the summer program by doing seemingly so little. It's not little. It's, it's 4 days a week of a very thoughtful program, and whether they lift with us or not. But it's intentionally built off of the information we learn in the biomechanics assessment and what that person needs, and then is tracked and monitored in a way where we're not just randomly taking swings or randomly throwing pitches or going and doing full bullpens, or sometimes I'll see in the summer all of a sudden it's like a pitcher's throwing live or something, and it's just like, wait, what? It's just random, like we're just randomly grabbing things. And that, I think, is what leads to burnout. And so oftentimes when we have conversations with players who are exhausted, they do end up kind of jumping right into, now maybe we need to ease them into it because of things you said about pain, or we're trying to get to the root of certain things or that kind of thing. But they usually are able to kind of jump right into us. And it's refreshing to them once they start and kind of get a sense, if they haven't trained with us before, of like, this is very manageable. I can still have my summer. I can still work if I'm working. We've had people that have had internships. We've had people that, there's all kinds of things that people have done in the summer while training with us. We've had people where they're living on campus and they are just training for the summer, that is their main focus outside of just like living their social life or whatever it is. But I think this gives them, when you are not guessing, when you are not randomly grabbing at things, when it's not like, you need to make sure you get better this summer, go work hard, and that comes with no idea how to do that. It does feel easier, even though the work is likely to have so much more of a reward on the other side. And so I think whatever people are doing in the summer, that really should be one of your focuses, which is not to feel like I want to get better this summer, or I want to get healthy this summer, or I want to at least go back as good as I am. I, had a good year and I want to go back that strong this summer. And I'm going to do that by just guessing every day, waking up randomly every day and guessing what I'm going to do that day, like go have someone toss me front toss, or I'm going to do those things. And that to us seems crazy almost to think about, because no one trains like that with us. But that is a lot of times what people do in the summer. And if you go back the same, which I would say is a big if doing that, you will have learned nothing internally to sustain that in the next year. And that is when they start going poorly, you have no idea why. So I think of a hitter, I want to be as connected to what I'm going after, why I'm doing it. When I hit the ball this way, why does that happen? Where do I kind of fall into on my first move when it's changing? What are the holes I'm using? And using training to learn all of that. So when inevitably that starts to happen for you in season or on campus, that to see and identify that sooner, and you can sort of go in that direction. So if you just keep riding this, maybe you are doing fine, or you're doing okay, or you're happy with your performance, but you ride that without ever having known the really intricate details. Maybe you even know what your spin profile is as a pitcher or something, but you've never trained in a way that connected, or known how to tap when it goes and how to get it back and all of that. You're just, you're hoping that when you go back, it kind of sticks, or you're hoping that you go back better. And I think that is what you have to do in the summer. What you have to do in that time period is get a basis to get better, and then to know how to maintain that throughout the season, or to know how all the red flags for maybe when that isn't happening, or what's going wrong. And I think that's one of the most powerful things when we're talking about empowerment. And whether your school has the resources or not, there's so many ways you can start to learn how to identify that. And so you can either phone us in or something on campus, or you can figure out a way to make sure that doesn't unravel. And I think that's really where we go wrong. Is oftentimes I'll be talking to people we work with when they get back to season, and they'll be like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm struggling with this. I'm like, no, you do have an idea what's going on. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the things about yourself and what you need to tap into, and how you can do that. And I think that is what is so powerful about the way that we go about the summer program, kind of in it with the athletes.
Yeah, I only phrased it earlier about if your school doesn't have resources in tech, you have to come and you have to see the data. That, because I do believe that, obviously, but we also have schools that we work with. Also, side note here, there's a good chance you're hearing my daughter reading a Bluey book in the background. So if someone's if you can hear something,
who's the kid?
Going on.
Yeah,
right,
great.
So we also have schools that we work with that have max high, very a lot of resources. They have max level of tech available to their athletes. Maybe they consult with us all year long, but they still want their athletes to come to us, because they're the power in the athletes knowing that level of individuality, having the one-on-one support, because it doesn't matter how knowledgeable a coach is, their job is to win. Their job is everyone on staff. It's not, they can't just sit down and have individual meetings, every single time, especially as seasons going on, maybe in off season and preseason, et cetera, but especially as seasons going on. And so, there have been a lot of circumstances where coaches we work with very closely, again, they have the tech, they have the resources, they have the knowledge, but their athletes coming for the summer and getting that same level, but of on a one-on-one basis, really, not just in training, but in conversation and talking about their data. It has created such a much stronger culture when they get back of oh, now I know why we're doing this. Even things of oh, I didn't fully understand why I did this, and this in my plyo routine. Oh, now I get why we're doing this at this intensity, because it's their coach is yeah, well, we've said that, and they have said it, but it's a different, when someone's communicating to you so directly, then it's, I think, a way for the athletes to just really embody and take ownership of what they do so much more, versus my coach tells me this, my coach gets advised by this person, and that trickles down to me. It's so much more direct. And I think it loops us all in so much tighter. And it makes for such a more powerful culture. in the next year when we're all now
Right.
communicating about, okay, she should throw more overload. Let's give her underload here. Let's switch this up, get her to this intensity. It's like we don't have to explain to the athlete anymore what we're talking about, what that language is, why we might do that. They're like, yep, got it, you know, because now all of a sudden they've spent all this time. And so I think that's we've had a lot of athletes like that they're a part of the system where like maybe I feel like I know them like the back of my hand because I've been managing them all year long, just not directly. And then, but they show up like, the hell is this place kind of thing, you know,
Right.
like they don't really know, but like my coach told me I should. And we've had just such great experiences and they're like, oh man, it all makes so much sense now. So I think that's a huge piece. At the end of the day, being great, I don't care who you play for. I don't care how good your coach is. You want to be great. You have to have 2 feet in the understanding of why the hell you're doing what you're doing.
You're not in charge of who your coach is, even at the collegiate level. It's like, for all you know, that person leaves the next year, or, you know, your pitching coach changes, your hitting coach changes, you move freaking conferences. Like, there's so many things that are just not in your control. And so you have to have that understanding for yourself. When we talk about players we've had that maybe we do work with our program, but the summer is our opportunity to work with them. The summer is about the athlete. We're not going and telling coaches things. Everything is athlete driven. It's their time to sort of be in control of that process. And it is so important because of all the things you already said, but you have to be in control as an athlete. You have to know these things. And we've had so many times where things have kind of like gone wrong. Or I think of one recently, we had an athlete come for winter break and she had a good fall, like a fine fall, and wasn't unhappy, but was like, I don't feel as powerful as I used to be. Like, I'm not really hitting the ball over the fence. And her exit velocity was down. Her weight was down. And these are things that like we hadn't, you know, the staff and resources she had and the sort of cohesion on that staff, not uncommonly, wasn't in a place to identify things like that. And so it's like, even though her swing and patterns look kind of similar to when she left, she lost power. You know, she went down in power, and there was not a management system in place to flag that for her. And so I think having the opportunity to reset and to really identify if things are off, where is that coming from? What is different? Maybe we missed some things because of all the possibilities of what could possibly go wrong in trying to manage an athlete, which is, you know, it's very complex to try to do. And so we missed some things, and this is our opportunity to really to go from here and to build, and most importantly, to do it with the athlete driving it, with the athlete understanding what we're going for. We build in a lot of like connection throughout the summer program. So even if athletes are training with us remotely, of being able to talk to them regularly about how the week was going, what are we going for, you know, helping them find access to data if they don't have it regularly, or coming to us to do check-ins, to make sure that we're really tying this all hand in hand, because it just really doesn't, you can't rely on your staff. And not because maybe you have a great staff, but you still just, you can't, that cannot be where you put all of your sort of like eggs in the basket. You have to know those things for yourself, because even when I think of like, if I call pitches, you know, I'm the pitching coach and I'm the one calling the pitches. If I, as the pitcher, and I, as the catcher, don't understand the nuance of the 0-2 version of that pitch in that call, it loses its thing. And so, yes, you could blame the coach for that, but you have to be understanding, why am I throwing this pitch in this count? Why does this pitch effective against this lefty? You know, what am I trying to induce here or make happen here? And it's really similar with training. Even if you have a coach who is able to communicate some of those things to you, if you can't really be driving it and have the sort of knowledge of it, it's just not going to go as far as it can. And so summer program, I always say, like, wherever you go, I'm not sure there is, just in, you know, full humility. I think our place is the only place that really does it this way. But you have to go to a place where you're going to get this baseline of what the heck are we working on? You and that place are going to be held accountable to that. And you are going to be educated along the way of, we are going for X, we're doing it with Y, and let me make sure you understand why we're doing that. Let's keep checking if it's working. If we pivot off of that, let's make sure we pivot off of it together. And you're really driving the boat so that you go into that next year with your own knowledge, even if you're walking into a staff that can then take that and run with it. And I would say, especially if not, and making sure that you're able to do that. All right, should we end there? I feel like I kind of wrapped it up for us.
I think you kind of wrapped it up. That's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, until next week, we're getting close to May. I was watching a game the other day and I was just like, whoo, we are tired. We are tired. So hopefully everyone can get geared up here for conference play soon and postseason. I'm sure we'll be talking about that in the next couple of episodes. But until then, make sure you're making your summer plans. Like and subscribe the OGX podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast. It helps us and we appreciate it.